despite the holiday rains, the news is still not good as it relates to the Mississippi River. I'm Feedstuff's grains editor Andy Vance, filling in for Max Armstrong in this Dateline Drought update. Dateline Drought is brought to you by Genuity's Drought Guard Hybrids. We have seen some precipitation, especially in the eastern reaches of the Corn Belt and some of the northern parts of the plains, that could benefit the Mississippi River. In fact, perhaps some of that water extended navigation on the mighty Mississippi a little bit longer than had been anticipated. But the situation is still not good news. I talked last week with CEO of the National Grain and Feed Association, Randy Gordon, about the situation, and he gave me a pretty blunt assessment of the forecast for shipping traffic there on the nation's main river artery. Basically, based on December 26 projections from the Army Corps of Engineers and the weather forecast, commerce on that critical 200-mile stretch of the river between St. Louis and Cairo, Illinois, could grind to a halt as soon as, January 3rd or 4th. In other words, just a few days. Based on the most recent 28-day weather and water forecast, the Corps has advised industry stakeholders that navigation near Thebes, Illinois, that realm where we're essentially thinking of ground zero for the river problems, could stop much sooner than previous forecasts had suggested. Congress mandates, of course, that the Corps keep open a 9-foot navigation channel, and the Corps has said they may not be able to do that by mid-month. NGFA told me last week that forecasts are now suggesting the river gauge at Thebes could fall to 3 feet this week, meaning that vessel drafts would be limited to just 8 feet. And then the gauge could fall another foot the following week, putting drafts at just 7 feet, with worst-case scenarios telling us a navigable draft of only 6 feet could be the case by January 19th. Now, very few tow vessels can operate at the 8 or 7 foot draft, so read between the lines, could be very little shipping, if any, going on here in the next couple weeks. Now, back in December, the Corps quietly increased its release of Missouri River water from the Gavins Point Dam near the Nebraska-South Dakota border and would maintain that increased flow until at least January 2nd, and then they'll kind of evaluate things from there. The Corps also began releasing water from the reservoirs located south of St. Louis in hopes of providing up to an additional 6 inches of depth on that stretch near Thebes. As we've talked earlier, they've already started excavating some of those rock pinnacles there near that stretch of river. They were originally thinking about doing some blasting, but the river's low enough that they can move in some excavation barges and just dig the pinnacles out, and that's in the process of happening. But the bottom line is the river needs more water. Some of the ice that we've seen on the upper Mississippi has actually restricted some of the water that might have otherwise been flowing south into those critical navigation channels, and a confluence of fairly unfortunate events has made it look like the first few days of the new year could be pretty treacherous for moving grain, fertilizer, and other commodities up and down the nation's inland waterway grid. We'll keep you posted. I'm Feedstuff's grains editor Andy Vance, in for Max Armstrong, and this has been Dateline Drought.